They are a nonpartisan educational think tank with the goal of shedding light on the origin and negative impact of nationalized citizenship. Their focus through education and legal activism is to reestablish America and her demi-sovereign states on a free and constitutional foundation. They say it's not just history, it's America's remedy. With that, please give a warm welcome to Cliff Muncy.
Thank you all for having us here today. Again, my name is Cliff Muncy. As Lynn said, I am the Director of Media for America's Remedy. You can see our big blue tent down here at the end. I'm going to invite you several times through the course of the presentation to visit our table before you leave today. We've got some educational materials we'd like to give to you. It is our third year, so I appreciate you guys having us back. And let's give a big hand to Lynn and all of the organizers that put this event together. In case you're unfamiliar, our organization, America's Remedy, is a nonpartisan educational think tank. Our focus is on state rights, how we lost them, and how we get them back. If you haven't visited our table, I'd like to ask you, please, before you leave, come by the table and get some information. We also speak across the eastern U.S., so our presenter, historian, and activist, John Ainsworth, would love to give a presentation in your neck of the woods. Friends, I've read stories lately that have stunned me. The lack of civility and order in America continues to grow by leaps and bounds. A man flings chicken feces at a restaurant in protest of a discriminating restaurant owner. A woman, a congresswoman, in fact, rallies Americans to harass and discriminate against those who would support an opposing political party. Friends, I've even heard talk of another civil war looming in America. Most folks today tend to do a lot of finger pointing at the opposing political party, but I think people on both sides of the aisle are missing critical information. Psalm 11:3 tells us, if the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? Foundations are critical for a sound structure. If you build a house, you want its foundation to be solid. So today I'd like for us to dig a little deeper beyond these branch issues that we're constantly hearing about to find and discover the root of our problems. So today I want us to start by taking a look at America's foundation. Today, of course, is July 4th. On July 4th, 1776, America declared her independence. This wasn't a vote for a new Republican or Democrat. It wasn't the coronation of a new king. It was rebellion and treason of the highest order. It was the sacrifice and deaths of over 30,000 in a bloody revolution. It was the creation of a system which would ensure safety and protection of God-given rights. The then 13 colonies arranged their affairs into something called the Articles of Confederation. 11 years later, each state, at different times, mind you, independently seceded from those former articles to adopt a constitution which would form the next iteration of American government. One of the big questions at the time was just how centralized this new American government would be. How much power are we going to give to the federal government? So on the far end, you had those who referred to themselves as Anti-Federalists. They wanted very little power granted, and they wanted the federal government to be very small. On the opposite side, you would have the Nationalists, who wanted ultimate national control and a large federal government. And then I would place in the middle, but probably a little closer to that conservative side, another group called the Federalists. So you have the Anti-Federalists, you have the Nationalists who want big government, and in the middle, you have the Federalists. The Federalists only wanted certain big picture things to be national, but they wanted everything else reserved to the states. So, for example, we could wage war as a nation, we could have a common money, we could accommodate travel between the states, but national aspects like these would be specifically enumerated in our Constitution. In other words, the federal government could only do what these independent sovereign states specifically listed in the Constitution. Even civil rights determinations at this time were not the job of the federal government. Under true limited federalism, the federal government just plain didn't have the power to come into your state and tell your people that they couldn't, say, pass laws against abortion, or that they couldn't have prayer in your public schools, because your state was your people. These things were up to the citizens of your state to control. At this time, states even had the power to have religious foundations for their laws, if they so chose to do so. Isn't that the very opposite of what we're being told today? If you'll visit our table, bring your phone over and visit our table today. We have a large poster of the original Christian state constitutions. I would encourage you to snap a photo of that and share it with your friends online. This is the kind of power of self-government and true independence that our states held at that time. As Federalist Paper number 39 said, each state in ratifying the Constitution is considered a sovereign body, independent of all others. The new Constitution will, if established, be a federal and not a national constitution. These were two different terms at our founding. The Federalists wanted to create a most unique hybrid model where states kept their full sovereignty as countries unto themselves, each state with a unique people, but these states or countries existed in a voluntary union, a federation with very limited national aspects and a small federal government. Friends, this July 4th, many of us are celebrating independence, but unfortunately we have been nationalized. We have grown dependent on national government. Those original boundaries around our states and that respect for free governments, that concept is no longer there. These states we know today are really more states by name only. Last year, if you recall, I spoke about the Reconstruction Acts and how these congressional acts coerced the amending of our Constitution with the 14th Amendment. Of course, the primary purpose of these acts, together with this amendment, was to nationalize citizenship. Prior to this time, we were citizens of our states, and we held a state loyalty. But this was to make us citizens of the national government rather than citizens of our respective state. And so whereas before this time we had state-protected, God-given rights, we see that now this has been replaced with national privilege based on humanism. Today's states are all composed of 14th Amendment national citizens who prefer national privileges, national benefits, protected classes, and forced equality rather than having autonomy and the liberty to freely self-govern their particular jurisdiction. This rampant confusion and the general disrespect we're seeing today for cultures and borders, friends, I think all of this can be traced back to these specific historical violations of our Constitution, which created the very system of American government we all know today. If you'll come by our table today, I'll give you an access to a list of 15 violations of our Constitution that you can take home with you today and begin your study. Because this July 4th, I'd like to bring a challenge. That each and every one of us consider this holiday as a recommitment to focus our efforts on restoring America's foundation of federalism and a limited federal government. You know, as many Americans today rail against Christianity, I find it ironic that it's actually the very lack of Christian values which are ripping the country apart. We no longer respect boundaries. We no longer respect property. And we no longer love our neighbors or our enemies. And friends, it is indeed ripping the country apart, whether we're ready for it or not. And though we've tried our best to glue them together permanently, the seams are coming unraveled all by themselves. as we read about these stories like the Christian Colorado cake baker who was dragged through the court system for not acting against his beliefs on his own property. We see from this that we need respect for boundaries and separation on so many levels. We need respect for states to differ, just as we need respect for people to differ, for cultures to differ, and even for people with a common belief system to create peaceable societies. We need to allow the free markets of business and the free markets of ideas the opportunity to govern themselves. Today, this is a radical concept, but self-government requires the liberty to self-govern. Friends, from the deepest point, if we're to have liberty, we need to develop some consistency of morality as human beings. And to me, I think that's why we're all here today. So what is America's remedy? Well, America's remedy is firstly education. We're educators on the idea that liberty cannot be had without first having personal responsibility, respect for boundaries, and respect for the law. We're educators for the untold story of the Reconstruction Acts, acts which 2 years after the Civil War redeployed the American military in order to forcefully nationalize every American state, a total inversion of American government from limited federalism to all-out nationalism. But ultimately, America's remedy is a plan, a grassroots blueprint to reestablish our original, lawful, sovereign states which have been taken away from us. It's a plan to restore the boundaries of state rights. It's a plan to revisit those originalist ideas upon which we were founded so that the peace and prosperity that we so desperately need can once again be attained. You know, people tell me that they'll get involved when things get bad. Well, friends, we're there. The time to stand is now. And if you don't believe that we're there yet, I would like to ask you, when will that time be? When will things be bad enough for you to get involved? There are some who believe the remedy our organization espouses is simply too radical, or perhaps it's simply too far away. But I would say that radical times call for radical measures. And friends, I think our founders would agree. If we continue to believe that voting and politics as usual is enough, we're only fooling ourselves. It's time to do more. I hope you'll come by our table today so we can meet you and give you a few resources for you to take home and start your study or continue your study. Like I said, we've spoken across the eastern U.S. and we'd love to come speak to you, or perhaps a group that you might be a part of. We're on YouTube. We have lots of videos on YouTube. Our speaker, we film entire hour and a half presentations. You can go and view those. We're also on Facebook, America's Remedy, and americasremedy.com. I'll leave you with this simple thought. To have liberty is to reduce government. But to reduce government requires a people capable of governing themselves. The solution must begin here. Thank you.